This tutorial is to show you how to add a shadow to make your photo composition more realistic looking. So you'll notice that in this photo of the Golden Gate Bridge, there is light. It looks like the sun is maybe setting, so the light is coming from this side, and then there's a pretty dramatic shadow here. So if my ladybug were actually in the same place, it would also be casting a shadow that's similar to this. The way I'm going to start out to make a shadow is I'm going to make a duplicate copy of my ladybug. I just want to make sure I know what layer. I'm going to label it just for my own self. Okay, so I'm going to duplicate that, Command J. You can also go up to this menu and you can click duplicate layer right there. So what I'm going to do is, this is ladybug, I'm going to say shadow. And I'm actually going to put it below the ladybug layer. So right now I have an exact copy of my ladybug. First thing I want to do is make it all black. Okay, so I'm going to go up to Image Adjustments, and then I'm going to go to Hue Saturation, and I'm just going to pull all the lightness out of it. And when I do that, it makes it all black. So that's an easy way to make it all black. So now I have this black sort of character that's like my ladybug but is right on top of it. So I actually need to flip the shadow upside down in order to make this sort of an authentic shadow. So what I'm going to do is go up to Edit, that's where we go. And we're going to go to Edit and we're going to say Flip, and in this case I want to flip vertical. I want to flip it upside down, not side to side. So you see it flipped upside down. So now what I want to do is use my move tool, and I want to drag it down and away from my actual ladybug. I'm going to turn my ladybug back on so you can see it. And at this point, I need to do a couple of things. First of all, you kind of want the shadow to be touching it depends on a couple of factors, but we kind of want I think the legs in this case here, we want them to be showing on the bridge. More like this. So your shadow is going to vary depending on your scene. Sometimes you're going to want it to touch the feet if the person's on the ground or the thing's on the ground. Since the ladybug is kind of flying through the air here, I want the ladybug's legs to sort of show up on the bridge here, shadow. So now, right now, there's too much shadow here, right? It's more than I need. So what I can do is actually go in and sort of erase away the parts of the shadow that I don't really need. I'm going to go to my eraser tool over here on the left side. Kind of looks like a brick. And in this case, you can decide on the brush you want to use. Depending on the kind of shadow you're making, you either want it to be fuzzy or kind of a more hard edge. So I'm going to use the hard edge brush, and I'm going to go in, and anywhere that I don't think that I need the shadow, I'm just going to go erase that. Make sure that you're on the shadow layer, very, very important. It might also be helpful to make this layer a little bit transparent by changing the opacity, so I can actually see where it's going to be hitting the bridge. That's actually really helpful. So I'm going to just continue erasing away here. And then doing that, and so when I turn the opacity back up, the shadow, now I understand that the shadow right now looks like ridiculous and it's too harsh, so we need to fix that. So that's what we're going to do next. We're going to go up to Filter, and we're going to go to Blur, and we're going to go to Gaussian Blur. Maybe a new vocabulary word for you. Gaussian blur lets us control how much blur we add to an image. So I'm going to slide this up. In the case of my shadow, a lot of shadows you might have a more diffused, like soft shadow like that. But in the case of my shadow for my ladybug, my shadow is going to be pretty sharp, because if you look at the shadow on the Golden Gate Bridge that was already there in the picture, it's pretty crisp. So I'm going to blur it as much as I feel like I need to, and from this point, I also feel like because part of the shadow's going into the fog, I'm a little concerned about that part. Right now it looks a little funky, so I'm going to hide that for a second and take a look. There's a couple of ways to approach this. I could take my eraser and just change the opacity at which I'm erasing down to something like 10%, and it only erases a little bit at a time. And then I could go and I could erase it slowly. Every time I click is when it starts erasing more. So you guys can see that as I do this, it's slowly sort of evaporating rather than a hard line it's going to sort of start blending in with the fog. That's the idea. So actually that worked out really well, I think, in terms of creating that shadow. Now, the final thing is it still feels really harsh, and I can't see the bridge through it at all. So what I could do is either lower the opacity a little bit on the layer, so I can make it like a little see-through so that you can actually see the bridge. I want it to be matched though, the shadow that's already there, and I'm going to zoom in for a second. And this is the original shadow that was in the photo. So I want this to look like that. So it's, I think I'm actually a little too transparent with this. Another option, if you're not finding the transparency is working, is you could try using a blending mode, like multiply, which didn't do much for me. I could also try overlay. Overlay is kind of nice because it actually does let the bridge kind of show through, although I'm not sure if that's dark enough, but I'm going to zoom out and see what that looks like. I don't think that's the right look for my picture. Overlay might be really good for you if you have a softer shadow. So I'm going to go back to normal, and I'm going to just take my opacity down to like 90%. And from here it just looks like I need to adjust the position a little bit, trying to imagine where this shadow might fall if the ladybug was actually in this position. I might want to move it up a little bit. And that is how you create a shadow.